So we are so close to starting, and I'm getting so impatient. But believe it or not, the time between the fires and now has actually flown by pretty quickly for me, or at least faster than I thought it was gonna. But these last couple weeks, they are moving so slowly. So to take my mind off of how slow it feels like it's going, I decided to do an episode on how we designed our kitchen. And yeah, our kitchen is designed. It's been designed for months. Follow me. I'm standing where our kitchen existed before the fire. And if you'd been here before, you would know it was tiny. And if you've watched this vlog, I think we pretty much established that people 100 years ago were tiny, which would explain the tiny garage, the tiny hallway, and the tiny kitchen. They're so tiny. So we were able to add about 3 feet on the back of the kitchen, which it's about 30 square feet. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but I think it's gonna be pretty noticeable because of how small the kitchen was. So that basically doubles the size of our kitchen. No, it wasn't that small. It's pretty small. Chris knows what she wants as far as colors and tile and countertops, that kind of thing. But it was just mainly to get like a floor plan of the kitchen, the way we had a floor plan made of the house. And, you know, the designer took us to a certain point, but then we felt like we could take it from that point on. Chris would admit that she has, you know, a lot of ideas that needed to be edited down. And the kitchen designer, God bless her, she just couldn't keep up with Chris's brain. So that's when I felt like I could come in and help out. Because who knows kitchens better than me? But seriously. So the reason why I felt like I would be of some benefit in this at this point was because the kitchen designer, had made a couple 3D renders. And I mean, designing kitchens is her forte, maybe not designing in 3D. But you know, the renders were just very flat. There was no reflection, there were no shadows, the lighting wasn't right. And so I just kind of felt like, you know, that was the time to step in. So as it turns out, Chris married a 3D designer. And how lucky for her, right? Finally, I'm useful. And really what it came right down to was the feedback process. And it was really slow. So Chris would want to see a different tile in the backsplash, and it would take days, if not a week, to get something back. And when you're trying to be creative and trying to bounce out ideas, it's too slow. It didn't work for us. So I took the designer's basic drawings and I brought them into my 3D program. And then I modeled the cabinets and made it so that I could swap out colors and textures very quickly. I set up an interior lighting setup, and I was able to rough out 20 different looks within a couple of hours as opposed to weeks. Which really helped because Chris and I are very visual, and sometimes it's hard to describe what you want because you kind of have to see it before you really know what that is. And it was very similar to how I worked with our structural engineer, right? Back and forth, just honing it down just till we got something that works. And if I'm being honest, I think our designer was getting frustrated with us because we're not our typical client. You know, this is sort of like it takes a village. I mean, I'm a designer, and when the client gets as involved as we did, it's frustrating. I'll admit that. And usually when you're designing something, you know, the more cooks in the kitchen, get it? It usually makes for a very bad soup. But in this case, I think it works. And if it works, it works. And I think it works.
Pro tip.
So kitchen designers and architects, etc., they'll often talk you into using, you know, their vendors for things like tile and for cabinets and hardware and whatnot. And in return, they'll add a markup. It can't be a fire. There's nothing left to burn. Kitchen designers, architects, etc., they'll often talk you into using their vendors for things like tile, cabinets, hardware, and that's fine, but they're going to add a markup to those items, which is why kitchens can start getting very expensive. They'll tell you that they get discounts because they are a licensed builder or designer, which is true. But then when you have to pay them a markup, it pretty much mitigates the discount that they just gave you. So if you don't know what you are doing or you don't know what you want, a kitchen designer can be very helpful, but also very expensive. In our case, if you know what you're doing, then you can source different parts of that project out to different vendors and you can save yourself a lot of money. But if you take that on yourself, then you have to make phone calls, you have to source the materials, and time equals money. So it becomes one of these things, right? But for someone who's marking up services that you could do easily, you can save yourself a ton of money. So just beware. Kitchens are already expensive. And, if there's things that you can do to save a couple thousand here or there, it really starts to add up. And it also doesn't hurt to be bold, like my wife. And like I'd mentioned before on another episode, it's like if your contractor is waiting for your cabinets to show up and they're not there, they're just going to move on to another project, and then you get put on the bottom of the priority list. There's no such thing as being too prepared and too early when you're going to start doing something like this. Now, if you were coming on here expecting to see the final version of our kitchen, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to disappoint you. You're not going to see it yet. Partially because we reserve the right to change our minds as this project goes on, and we still have months before we even implement any of this. But there's definitely a sense of relief in knowing that for the most part this is all done, and now we can move forward on things that need our attention, like filling that hole with dirt and getting that sucker graded. We are so close. Keep watching the vlog. You're going to see the final design of the kitchen eventually, hopefully sooner than later.